Welcome to the commentary booth where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator Jam Yaps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of color commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by the man behind Original Geek and one of the hosts of Down Under the Ring podcast. Welcome to the show, Phid McAwesome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, dude. We've been interacting for a wee while online, and it's nice to actually be talking to you in person.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And as soon as I saw this show pop up, I was like, yep, this is going to be the perfect crossover episode from
Oh,
Down Under the Ring
absolutely,
in the commentary
absolutely.
booth. So in terms of a bit of background, why don't you go ahead and sort of introduce yourself to our audience and sort of tell them all about Original Geek and the Down Under the Ring podcast?
Yeah, okay. So I'm Phid McAwesome. I've been working in video games marketing for over 10 years. Have done so for pretty much every big brand you can think of, and I've recently decided to go independent and launched Original Geek off the back of all of the work I've done for all these other brands and agencies in the past, and going off and doing it ourselves, which is super exciting. Myself, my wife, and another business partner have launched it, going really well. We've got some awesome stuff coming up in the coming months, which keep an eye on our socials to see if you can be involved if you're a content creator, because we're working with a lot of content creators from not just gaming. So historically, I've always worked in gaming, but with this new business, we're taking advantage of all the other interest groups that we have ridiculous knowledge on. So it's everything from gaming to pop culture, and then we've sort of grouped in fandom as well, which is sort of over all encompassing of things like pro wrestling, UFC, cars, basically anything that has a obsessive fan base around it. We're using our knowledge to be able to help brands connect with that audience. And on the side of it, I've been a pro wrestling nerd for a long time. Since I was a kid, I was a WWF fan in the 80s, WCW kid in the 90s, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's just been ongoing. I used to try and water down how much of a wrestling fan I was on social media, but in the last few years, I've just gone, screw it. This is who I am. I'm a massive wrestling nerd, and we launched Down Under the Ring 10 weeks ago, I believe, maybe 11. Um, and it was myself and the Warship, who was actually a talent that I worked with on the gaming side of things, because he's a Twitch streamer as well as a pro wrestler. And me and him, essentially, the podcast came out of me and him having business meetings around work stuff. And those business meetings would essentially be 10 minutes of us talking shop about a promotion or a campaign I've got him working on or whatever. And then we'd spend the next hour talking about what's happening in pro wrestling. So we were
Very
like,
good.
you know what? And we talked about it for about 2 or 3 years. Was about, we really need to start a podcast, bro. And finally, yeah, we decided, screw it. I already owned the rights to the name Down Under the Ring. I'd secured it a long time ago and done nothing with it. So we just did it. And here we are 11 weeks later, and we've had some amazing guests on. We've started arguably at one of the busiest times in pro wrestling, with the amount of stuff that's happening across AEW, WWE on the business side of things with acquisitions. And this week's going to be a bit of a messy week with a lot of the business happenings, but hey, it's fun.
Yeah, not the greatest week for talent, but great week for podcasters and news.
Oh, exactly, right.
And I saw, you switched to like splitting the episodes into two? Is that a
Yeah, we
permanent
just
move,
started
or
that
is that
this week.
just because
So
of?
essentially, that came out of, we were having trouble trying to keep the show down to around about an hour, because we find that an hour is a sweet spot for a podcast. It's not too long for people to listen to on the way to work and on the way home, but it's also long enough that you feel like you've listened to a decent show. And we were having so much trouble trying to keep it down to an hour, talking about WWE, AEW, and we sort of sprinkle in a bit of the other brands as well, but we also try and make sure we're giving Australia and New Zealand promotions a lot of love as well, and trying to squeeze all of that into an hour was so hard. So what we've decided, screw it, we're splitting the show in two. We're doing a WWE episode every week and an AEW episode every week. And so far, we've done it for the first week. It's flowed really nicely. It's also helped us structure the shows better as well, because we were sort of hopping from topic to topic throughout the show, and we'd be talking about WWE at the start, and then we'd go over to the other brand, and we were chopping and changing. So it's helped us actually structure the show a lot better too.
Very nice. And then in terms of sort of our coverage areas on the commentary booth, movies and TV, what would you say are your favorite movies and TV shows?
I'm a Marvel nerd, bro. Marvel and Star Wars.
Oh, lovely.
All you have to do is have a look at my tattoos, and you'll see how much of a nerd I am. I've got like Star Wars tattoos, and I've got DC tattoos and Marvel tattoos, and that's really, I'm just into nerdy shit, if I'm going to be honest. But in saying that, I also love good bioflicks as well, like biographies of musicians and stuff like that, because I'm a massive music nerd as well. So I'm a sucker for a good bioflick.
Perfect. Yeah, if you check out, have you got Prime Video?
Yes, yeah, I've got almost every subscription. I spend way too much money on that stuff.
Me too. Maybe check out the Cassandra film that just dropped on Prime Video.
I will have to check that out.
It's very good, especially if you like a bioflick and you love wrestling. It's the perfect crossover.
I will have a look.
And then, so before we dive into our topic this week, covering Netflix's documentary series Wrestlers, just want to give recognition that Paria Magazine stands in solidarity and support of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA in their fight for better working conditions. Our publication has always been focused on the creative brilliance of the individuals rather than the business of TV and film. As such, we're continuing to highlight all of their creative talents during this time so that their contributions to our entertainment is not overlooked. Thankfully, it looks like that strike might be coming to an end soon.
Power to them, man.
Yes, very much so. Like, what was it? Suits, the most like viewed show on Netflix the last like 3 months, and
I tell you what, as somebody that lived through the strike in the early 2000s and saw the damage it did to the industry then, I hope that they come to a resolution. But in saying that, I also don't want to rush the process, man, because all these people deserve to be paid everything that they are worth and have their likenesses and careers and all that secured and safe and promised to them.
Yeah, 100%. But this week we're sort of getting away from that with we're climbing into the squared circle, venturing into the world of independent professional wrestling as we react and review the Netflix docuseries Wrestlers. On that sort of strike front, weird that wrestling isn't involved in SAG-AFTRA because they're essentially actors as well.
Yeah, essentially they are, but wrestling has always fit into a weird sort of thing where it's a pre-written show, but the way that the industry is run is arguably shady when it comes to the way that they handle their staffing and stuff like that, because like all of the wrestlers are all independent contractors. They're not paid actors. They're not treated as paid actors. They don't have a union. And I assume that there would be massive pushback, especially from the WWE side, if there ever was a union. Look, I've always been a massive proponent for unions and stuff, so I hope that they are able to get some protection. But look, arguably AEW is doing a better job of looking after their talent and doing things that WWE don't when it comes to looking after their booking of flights and accommodation, all that sort of thing, and paying for that for them. But we're going to go down a massive segue of a track that is away from this TV show if I continue going.
So in terms of the Wrestlers documentary series, 2023 documentary series focusing on Ohio Valley Wrestling, which is now led by Al Snow. OVW is a promotion which has fallen from its glory days, molding the likes of Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Dave Batista, Randy Orton, and The Miz for the big time, but now led by Al Snow, who struggles to make ends meet under new ownership and with new young talent. Directed by Greg Whiteley, who previously brought us the Cheer series on Netflix, which documented the world of collegiate cheerleading. What did you think of this show before we dive into breaking down the characters and some of the
Oh,
storylines?
I think it's a well-produced show. This guy's got a really good history of making this style of docu-series. And he does a great job of pulling together multiple stories so that it makes sense, and it's beautifully shot. It's a good combination of using footage that they've shot as well as tying in footage from their own from OVW's productions, and telling a really good story of how things are actually done behind the scenes. Because I mean, I'm going to assume that 90% of viewers of this docu-series are going to be wrestling fans, and a lot of us know the basics of the inner workings of the industry. Kayfabe died a long time ago. For those who don't know what kayfabe is, it's the terminology of trying to keep it real and pretending that pro wrestling is a very real sport. It died a long time ago. So we
Mhm.
all know the ins and outs from a basic point of view, but I think it's been great to see it from a granular point of view of seeing, even at this smaller level, um, how the storylines are come up with, how they're pitched, what's going on behind the scenes with some of the dramas between the talent as well as management. And because this is a smaller business, seeing all the dramas of the people that are financing this and trying to turn the business around. It's a super interesting look into it that we haven't really seen from in this sort of detail before.
Yeah, I thought it was a great depiction of independent professional wrestling, especially like the audiences, the different varied audiences that these sort of shows can draw. Like
Yeah.
there's some episodes here where they show a show that has lucky to have maybe 50 to 100 people
Yeah,
there,
well, there was one
and
pay
then
per
they'll
view
have
that
other
also
shows that
only
are
pulled like
sold out.
75 views the entire, like globally.
Mhm.
And you're like, wow, this is. I- I've seen Twitch streamers pull more than this concurrently.
Yeah, and it explains why they're losing so much money. I think what was that? They were targeting 500 pay-per-view buys to basically break even,
Yeah,
and then they got 74 at 14.99 a pop.
yeah. And they're
So,
losing $2,000 a week on the production of the TV show.
yep, $30,000 a month, and then towards the end of the season, they say that they lost $180,000 in the 7 month period.
God, it's phenomenal. It's a
It's
phenomenal
like,
amount of money to lose. I also think the biggest story in this is, from a business perspective, as somebody that's, I hate using the term businessman, but I'm a business person. I've been working in business for a long time, and one of the first lessons you learn in business is putting the right people in the right role. And Al Snow is a legend in the pro wrestling business. He's an amazing storyteller. He's a great trainer. He's not a businessman.
mhm, yep. And I think that's where the friction ends up coming through with Al and Matt, the new owner, as
Yeah,
well, because they're both trying to do each other's roles at points. Like Al's trying to do business bookings and like book shows and things,
mm.
which Matt is also trying to do, and then they're both trying to like contribute to the creative aspects, and it's just we need to all define our roles a bit better, I
Oh,
think.
absolutely, absolutely. And look, right at the start, the two new owners, was it Matt and who's the other bloke? Craig.
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They were quite vocal about the fact that they are investing in this and they know that it's not a money making business and all this sort of thing. And then later on, it's like, we need to make money. So, dude,
Mhm.
you've gone to the wrong business straight away. Um, but even as business people, like the way that they're handling a lot of their operations as investors is really weird to me as well. Like, there's that whole bit with the guy who's looking after the marketing,
Yep.
where they
Yeah,
basically
the
say, you've got to
and
prove yourself or else you're going to lose your job, dude. It's like, well, that's all you've said. You have given this dude no guidance, haven't told him how we can improve his job. Literally all you've done is get better or fuck off.
mhm. And especially like with those guys, especially like Matt, who works in radio and like promotion is kind of his area. So like he
Radio
could
is a
really mentor
promotion
that
business.
guy and help him.
I actually come from a radio background. That's what I was trained in. It's what I worked in before I got into what I'm doing now. And on the front of it, it's an entertainment business, but it's a promotional business. Like you are 100%, everything you're doing is selling the advertisers product, reading ad reads, it's promoting. You are a one-person promoter on live on air, and this dude just can't seem to figure out how to do it. He did a great job of promoting OVW during his shows, by the sounds of it, but um, I, outside of that, he doesn't seem to have a clue what he's doing.
Yeah, like he could have taken this guy under his wing and really helped him. And it sort of, to me, that highlighted the importance of having respect for the business in terms of both ownership and promoters, but like also just having respect for the talent as well, because that guy that he tells to get better or get out, he's also doing video and editing work.
Yeah,
He's the
he's the graphic
commentator.
designer. Yeah.
He's doing 15 different, wearing different hats all the time, doing all different things. And apparently he's not worth what he's being paid. It's like, okay.
Yeah, and the guy's doing a lot of work. It just sounds like the dude needs some guidance on how to do a better job of what he's doing, right? To be honest, he could probably do a better job if you took some of those jobs off him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah,
I think he said he's doing 40 hours a week of like between all of the roles. It's like, yeah, no wonder
I think he mentioned
kind of
somewhere in
half-assing all
episode
of
2
them.
that he spent like 20 hours doing graphics for the show, to promote the show. Also, that's a massive amount of time to be spending on that, because graphics is an element of marketing, right? All you had to do was take that role off him, hire someone off, like, honestly, hire someone off Fiverr.
Yeah.
Hire someone off Fiverr
Like
to do the graphics for
someone
you.
that can do
Yep.
Photoshop and motion graphics and
Yeah. And then it frees this guy up to focus on marketing us for you.
Yep. Yeah, so a bit silly in terms of stuff like that, in terms of how the business is run. But to me, that also screams like independent wrestling as well, where everybody has different hats and does lots of different roles to get shows up and running.
It's definitely not a surprise, right? I've worked for enough smaller business and startups where, your job description says one thing, but what you actually do is a million different things. And like I said, I work with Twitch streamers and stuff all the time as part of my job. They're all the same as well. They're not just a streamer. They're a marketing person. They're a writer. They're an editor. They're a, you name it. They're their own accountants.
Yeah,
they do everything.
Media manager, everything.
So, not surprising that they've got people in those roles that are doing multiple things, but the leadership should be guiding a lot more. And I feel like Al, as the man on the floor running the business, is so focused on the old school way of doing things and more focused on storylines and the show and the training and stuff like that, that he's letting the promotion of the business and the running of the business and all that sort of thing fall away, and then wondering why it's not working. Why am I not getting enough people watching the show? I don't understand. The storylines are great. Who knows about your storylines? Like, do they have a TikTok account? Do they have a Instagram account? Are they putting out interesting content on those platforms? I highly doubt they are. I haven't actually looked, to be honest. But
yeah, well, until like this show, I had totally forgotten about OVW from back in the day when they had those bigger names under contract and were training those people. Like, I remember being, OVW is developmental, and then as soon as they lost that, it was like, no, they're gone.
Oh yeah. What is that? Florida Championship Wrestling essentially killed OVW.
Mm-hmm.
And
then NXT killed FCW.
Oh, well, that was sort of like more of a merge, right? Yeah. It was like we're going to take this and make it a bigger thing. I think Florida Championship Wrestling was wholly owned by WWE.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas OVW was at one stage was run by Paul Heyman.
Mm-hmm.
So you had one of the
greatest. It's
been
through a lot of hands.
Yeah, but you had one of the greatest minds in the business running that show. But in saying that, their job wasn't to get viewers and make money and stuff like that. Like, they would have been being paid handsomely by WWE to train all of these people. Well,
Mhm.
they were just a training ground that just so happened to put on shows.
Yeah, it was just like, let's blood these people and give them some experience in front of a live audience rather than like in a
I
warehouse
love
somewhere.
watching that old OVW footage too, like seeing the likes of Batista and John Cena and all that when they were sort of getting seasoning, and it's amazing footage to watch because you can sort of see how far they've come. Also, you see the ones that they had it right at the start and they just needed to get ready for TV.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing this show sort of highlights, that OVW is still like clinging to those days as like their big draw card, and I
Yeah,
kind of don't think that's really the way they should be leaning. Like with some of the independent promotions here in Australia, like MCW and PWA, like
Hmm.
they highlight their alumnists and talent. Like, hey, these people came from here, but they're not our focus anymore.
no,
Like they're gone. Now it's these are the new people coming through. These are the ones that you should be backing and supporting
yeah.
moving
I
forward.
mean, they sort of bring back some of the guys that work for like AEW that are allowed to work independent shows. Like I think one of the champs at MCW is Buddy.
Yep, yeah, he's the heavyweight champion,
Yeah,
I think.
heavyweight champion. So, and they bring in some awesome international guys, but a lot of their focus is still their own guys, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and PWA are the same. Like they constantly, like, they'll shout out Grayson Waller.
yep.
I saw today they just announced Jesse McKay is coming back to do like a training seminar there. So they
And
are
a lot of
still.
that is those guys that are giving back to the place where they came from as well, right?
Mhm, yep, yeah, which
And
is probably what OVW should be doing.
yeah. Like actually, I find it stunning that they don't seem to have any of their alumni coming back at all, especially the respect that Al has. Like, I was literally just reading um, Mankind, his book, and
Yep.
the amount of love he gives Al Snow throughout the entire book, right? So he's revered and respected in this industry, but he doesn't seem to be able to bring in any big names to sort of train and or even just appear on the show or whatever.
Yeah, like even just like running a seminar to like, this is what you need. Like these are the key factors to do well on like a TV aspect, and
Yeah,
they don't sort of get any of that, which makes me think what sort of bridges were burned during that separation
potentially.
from WWE at the time.
Potentially. I tell you, one of the other things about this show that made me laugh was the big lie that they told of being the only weekly TV show outside of WWE and AEW. I was
Mhm.
like, that's an absolute lie. Like, you've got Booker T, his promotion in the States, puts out a weekly show, Reality of Wrestling. It's out every week, and they're arguably doing a better job than OVW now of creating stars that are signed to both WWE and AEW. Um, you, to a lesser degree, probably a bigger degree, to be honest. You've also got Ring of Honor putting out weekly shows as well, which you could argue is part of AEW, I suppose. But there's a whole bunch of other companies out there.
MLW,
Huh?
MLW
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
weekly show, I
MLW
believe.
do weekly shows as well. Yeah, like
I
there are
think, I
other
think,
people out there doing it and doing it successfully.
yeah, think what they're like banking on there is saying that it's TV because it is on a broadcast. Like it's only like a local TV network, but it's on a TV network. Whereas, is the reality of wrestling on a TV network, or is it like a
That's a good point.
streamed
I'm not
show?
sure if they are on TV. TV. I'd have to look into that.
I
But
think
this is
that's their like caveat of we're on the TV network.
yeah, but that's arguably the mistake that Al's making as well, right? Is it's TV's not where it is anymore. How many people still have their TV plugged into an aerial?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like most people I know watch TV through a Chromecast or through online platforms on their TV now, on apps.
I
And
watch two things on over the air TV these days. I watch The Chase at 5 o'clock and the news at 6, and that's it.
yeah, well, see, I don't even watch the news anymore. I get all mine from online. Yeah,
Yeah, and I really only do that because I sit down, eat dinner, and watch the news.
yep,
So it's
yeah,
not like
100%.
it's not appointment viewing like TV used to be in the
No,
90s.
no. And you've got to have pretty good live TV, to be able to pull that off. And even then, like, I'm watching SmackDown and Raw live, but I'm watching it on binge. I'm watching AEW and Ring of Honor on Fight. So I'm not getting that on free-to-air TV, even though I can get it. I suppose not on free-to-air, but I can get it on terrestrial television.
Oh yeah, because AEW's on ESPN now,
Yeah.
which is wild to me when that was announced.
Yeah.
And then a couple of the other overall things that I noted down were I loved how it showed that sort of every wrestler kind of just has to look out for themselves on the independent scene in particular. Like Haley and her mum Maria when they commit to the women of wrestling.
Yep.
Yeah, it just shows that like as soon as an opportunity is presented on that independent circuit, wrestlers kind of have to take it, not so much like have any loyalties. Like if something bigger comes along, you jump at that chance.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it looks like Haley J just got a massive opportunity this week. So
I hope she did well after that. Like this show really made me think she's a star as long as she can sort of get a personal life straight.
Yeah, if she can keep control of the weed smoking and all that sort of thing. Like I think her partner was the one who raised the issue really well. Is she's one of these wrestlers that live their gimmick. And if she can keep that under control, I think she's the only star there. That and Shira.
Yep.
The Indian guy. Shira. He's amazing. So I'm going to say this. I think they're the only two stars on that whole roster that I could see making it. I didn't realize Shira was already signed to Impact. It's just he's not used.
Oh, is he still signed to Impact?
Apparently, he is still signed to Impact currently. And
weird.
Eh?
That's weird.
I know, right? Because he's off doing Uber delivery to keep the bills paid.
Yeah, I thought he went Impact, WWE, then got released.
So apparently he got released, went back to Impact, and is still signed there, apparently. Something I read.
Interesting. That's interesting.
He must be on one of those only paid to work contracts.
Yep. Yeah, one of the lower tier ones.
Yeah. But look, I think he's a star. Like, he's ready to go as well. He just needs a good story. And that's the problem, is if he got signed by the likes of WWE, they're going to put him in an Indian gimmick.
Yep.
Where he doesn't need that. Like, I think he could be a star just with a normal gimmick.
Which I think is what they do in OVW. They just let him be like the monster heel and face, whatever he's at the time. Yeah. And he does so well in that role.
And I think Haley J's character is amazing. And if they do sign her at WWE, or if AEW end up picking her up, I think one of the two will. I hope they let her keep this Trailer Park Princess gimmick. Because I think it's amazing. It's like she's got this attitude of, I'm better than everybody, but we all know she's not.
Yeah, it's such a unique
she's a little
gimmick.
Bit trashy, and it's awesome. I love it.
And in terms of her as well, like this also highlighted that there are some bad eggs that get into professional wrestling in terms of drug addiction, and her partner with domestic violence that gets quite heavy towards the end of the season.
I am not up to that part. I didn't realize that was a thing. This is okay. I'm curious to see how that ends up. It was funny though, because he was the guy where I was like, what is his gimmick? Is his gimmick that he sits in a car and talks?
Yeah, he does that the whole season. That's his whole, like, all of his interview segments are him like leaning out of his car window, and it's not even a nice car.
The weirdest framing I've ever seen for an interview on a documentary. But yeah, when I was looking at his work, he seems like a dangerous worker too. Just gonna say, that was my observation. So
yeah, in terms of like the cast, we've spoken about Al Snow. What did you think of Matt Jones? So he comes in from his radio background, purchases OVW with a business partner. And for me, early on in the season, he seems to actually like hate wrestling fans. Like there's a moment where he says he calls wrestling fans wrestling dorks that they won't pay money for anything. I'm like, that seems like a weird business to get into with that perception of wrestling fans.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird take on it too, because the one thing I know about, and I'll call them wrestling docs because I'm one of them. But hardcore wrestling fans, you can get so much money out of them as long as you're doing good
Oh,
shit.
they spend money. They'll spend money.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm sitting here with a background of wrestling masks and wrestling belts that I've paid way too much money for just because I love them. Um, and I've got merchandise for my favorite wrestlers, and um, it's literally we're the easiest marks in the industry of entertainment. You do something cool, you release something cool about that person, we've got it. We'll buy it.
Yeah, yeah. From my own experience, like I bought this from the UK, the blacksmith
I
apparel
love that
shirt.
shit. I love their stuff at the moment. I was considering buying their Scott Hall one.
Oh yes, very nice. And then I made the Australian Wrestling Cards, launched that company, and that's gone incredibly well. So wrestling fans will spend money if you make something cool.
Yeah,
So obviously they're not making anything cool enough to warrant people spending money on OVW.
exactly. Right. And I think that is honestly the problem is it's this weird thing of in this industry, like you said earlier, there's no loyalty. Like if they've got to go off to a better offer or whatever. But this is OVW seems to have this weird thing where they're loyal to a lot of their talent to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some people that are signed and given a spotlight that I'm not sure are worthy of the spotlight. Like, are they drawing money? Are they selling merchandise? Are they getting interest? From what I understand, there was only one person on that roster that was moving stuff, moving merchandise from the gimmick table, and that was Haley.
Yeah, and I think towards the end of the season we see like the cash flow character. He's doing decent at the merch table, but like he's not really a character that I would be super invested in like paying to watch a $15 pay per view.
Well, he was the guy I was thinking about when I was doing my rant. I don't think the gimmick suits what you see visually.
Mhm.
I'm not saying he's a bad wrestler. I'm just saying it needs to be repackaged into something that would make me support him. I wouldn't buy his merch.
Yep. Yeah, like he doesn't like the cash flow name screams more like hip hop and rap, not
Exactly.
random white guy from Ohio.
Yeah.
And in Matt Jones, have you been up? Are you up to the episode where he goes on a first date yet?
Yes, I just watched the first day. It was very weird and awkward, and I don't understand why it was there. Maybe it comes in later into the story.
No,
Um, it doesn't come back. That's it.
it doesn't. No, it's just the weirdest, like 15-minute segment. I was like, why did we agree to film this?
Yeah. So, okay, that makes me even more confused because it didn't make any sense being there.
No, I think they were just trying to like humanize him a little bit, but it didn't
But
humanize him in the right way. It made me just think he was very strange, very weird,
I
and like,
found him a little bit creepy.
mhm, yes,
Um,
especially with the comment "I do wrestling" to her.
yeah,
I'm like, bro, you don't do wrestling. You just own a company.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I don't understand why he agreed to film that. Why the producers agreed to include that in the show. Like it was just strange.
yeah. It was very strange. I don't understand what was there.
Yep. And then the other moment that really stood out for him was the seizure at the end of episode 3. That was probably the scariest moment in the season, and that was probably the moment where everything kind of flips for him and he kind of gets a little bit nicer afterwards because I think he realizes, oh, these people actually are like nice and like they look after him in that moment where they could have just been like, oh, stuff
Fuck
this
that
guy, he's
guy.
a jerk, so whatever.
Yeah. No. Look, uh, it's in. Like I said, I'm only up to only just finished episode 3, so I'm curious to see where that goes with him. But I think this is my take on this entire season: is it's not just interesting for wrestling fans. I think it's actually an interesting watch for people in business to see how to and how not to manage people.
Hmm.
Um, the fact that that is even a conversation of he's surprised that people are nice to him. Yeah, as a manager, if you're good at your job, people are nice to you.
Yeah, yeah. If you treat people well, they will look after you, and
But he
they'll
seems
work
surprised
harder.
by that.
They'll work harder for you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as a business watch, I find it really interesting as well. The entire time I was watching it, I was sort of watching it with both sets of eyes of, as a wrestling fan, watching the inner workings of the industry and looking at the talent. I will say this: I didn't see a lot of bad wrestling on the show.
Yep. Yeah, it was all solid.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, the other thing is watching it as somebody that works in business and works with companies a lot, and sort of seeing the inner workings of how this business was run and how terrible their marketing is and their promotions and um, their lack of talent relations, which I can understand. A company that small isn't going to have talent relations as a dedicated department or dedicated person, but still, if you haven't got that, you need to be that person now.
Yes. Yeah, or allocate someone that is going to sort of take on that role within the company, but there
Yeah,
isn't anyone there. Like they're dealing with people that are smoking, doing drugs in the parking lot of shows, and it's like
yeah,
getting arrested at the
yep.
time. It's like this is
Smoking
not a
weed before
great
they hop
look.
in the ring, and
Yeah, just not a good look for the business side of.
it's. I saw some commentary online around Haley J smoking weed before she hopped in the ring, and it was weird takes were like, "Oh yeah, but smoking weed is legal in most places in America." So it's not the legality. That's not the issue.
Mm,
Back in the day when I first left university, I worked in a meat factory. Shitty job, but I worked next to a guy who would smoke weed in his break. He'd go for a drive, come back at lunch, and he'd be standing next to me using a sharp knife after smoking weed. And the amount of times where he would be doing a cut and would accidentally knock me in the arm or something. He never cut me, but he hit me.
oh
And it
Jesus.
was like, dude, it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The whole point is smoking weed before you hop in the ring is dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, it's not the legality issues. It's that she's now going in there with people that are
Have to
trusting
trust her.
her to look after them, and she might not be all there.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, apart from that, uh, I thought Haley was amazing, and her mum, the amazing Maria James, the mother-daughter duo, was another little aspect that I didn't expect to see in this show. But I thought they were both great. But Haley was definitely the one that stood out as a future star if she can get her life in order.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, and look, there's one thing we all know about the pro wrestling business is generally it's a family business. Everyone who says I don't want my kid to get into it ends up having their kid involved, and everyone who says I don't want to get involved in the industry because my dad was in it, they end up getting involved.
Mhm. Have you seen Haley and Maria's death match yet? Are you up to that episode?
No, no, I haven't. I can't wait for that. I'm not
Yes.
much of a deathmatch person myself. Um,
Either is Al Snow apparently.
okay.
They ask
um,
they ask Al what's deathmatch wrestling, and his answer is it's something stupid.
yeah, and look,
So I was like, ah,
I'm a person that thinks I think blood being used and weapons being used at the right time is cool, and I don't have a problem with people that are fans of deathmatch wrestling. It's just I'm one of those people that it's not for me. I'm
yes,
never going
I'm
to
the
go
same.
out of my way to go to an event that's dedicated to deathmatch wrestling.
Hmm.
I cringe a wee bit when I watch Moxley and that in AEW doing deathmatch wrestling. I think I tweeted about it during All In. I was like, yeah, I'm not a fan of deathmatch wrestling, and I never thought I would see the day that it would be happening in the biggest event in a stadium like they had for All In. But hey, for those people that love deathmatch wrestling, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, I think like the blood and the weapons stuff, like as long as it's used at the right times, like it's not just thrown in there for the sake of it being thrown in there. Like if it's the culmination of some sort of feud, I'm fine with that. But it's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
oh, we're just gonna have a death match because we want to have a death match. Like that seems
That's
strange.
dumb. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it definitely needs to build up to that. But look, I'm curious to see what they're like in it because I wouldn't have picked Haley J from what I've seen so far as being a deathmatch queen.
yeah, she wasn't like super keen on doing it, but she wanted to do it with her mum as like this will be my first one because apparently her mum has done quite a few of them. So it was like a hey, let's they built it. This was the culmination of their sort of feud that they build throughout the season. And I was like, that makes sense. That's cool to see that it's there for a reason. It's not just oh, we're just gonna our
Yeah,
first
not just
match
gonna have a
together is
fight.
gonna be a death match.
Well, that's cool. That is cool. And I imagine they would have looked after each other being family too, right?
Yeah, they did
You have
fantastic.
to
And
in wrestling. You have to trust your dance partner, but even more so, I think, in deathmatch wrestling, you're literally putting your life on the line even more so.
and in terms of like the wrestling we see throughout the season, for me that was the best match that they show
Oh
in the
wow!
show. So they did a fantastic job. Really was really impressed by that match in particular.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Uh, we mentioned a couple of the other stars. Mahabali Shira, we sort of already spoke about. Like he's ready to go. It's just a matter of time and place for him. Uh, I was shocked Layla Gray wasn't featured as much as I had sort of anticipated, given her AEW sort of background as well.
Yeah, yeah. No. There's and I believe there's a few other people that are on the OVW roster that didn't get any screen time as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a few really interesting ones. Maybe it's just that they didn't want to be a part of a Netflix show they weren't getting paid for. Because I wouldn't be surprised if none of these people were getting paid for this show.
Yeah, I would imagine OVW might have got a payment, and that'd be about it.
Yep.
Just
And look, a lot
sounds
of
like a Netflix thing to do,
oh,
and
I also
and an
it's an
independent
independent
wrestling thing to
wrestling
do.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I wouldn't mind picking it. That was solely the reason is people just like, nah, I'm not getting paid. Don't want to be a part of it.
And from like, I can't like be certain of what the timeline was, but based on sort of where it all culminates at the end, I suspect like this may have been in the period where Layla was kind of going off to a lot of dark tapings and sort of starting to get her feet wet in AEW because at the end of the season she announces, "Hey, I've been signed to AEW." So perhaps she just wasn't around as much as
That could be the
Netflix
case.
needed, so that they didn't
That
really
could
want to build a
absolutely
story
be the
around
case.
her and then have her not be there for 3 weeks.
Yeah, that could absolutely be the case. And it could also be the same for those other people like who I said who have been working OVW in the last few months. Could be, they weren't there at all.
Yep, yep.
And
And
that's the
then
thing
the
is, anyone who doesn't understand wrestling, um, it's a business where people are traveling literally state to state overnight to get to gig to gig. So it's it's a tough business, man.
oh yeah, like we look at Matt Cardona and Steph DeLander.
I was just
Their
about to
their
say them.
schedule is insane.
Yeah, someone I've heard Matt Cardona say recently that even if WWE wanted to sign him back, he's booked for a year.
Yep. Yeah, I think he said
So
his
they
2024
would need to
calendar is
pay
already
him
full.
handsomely to get him to cancel those bookings.
Hmm. Yeah, and Steph's doing just as much work with him at the moment, and it's crazy. Like just today, they were in Japan, and then they're back to the States for a bit, and then not long, and then Steph's out here.
Yeah,
They're
well,
both out here for World Series.
they spend a lot of time over here. It's really dope.
Yeah, they're backwards and forwards all the time, and
Yeah, gutted. I missed out on tickets for World Series.
oh, spewing because it
Yeah,
looks pretty good. Not as good as it initially looked. They've lost a few of the sort of headline acts over the last
Yeah,
few
well,
weeks, which is a bit
some people
disappointing.
also got signed to deals in the last few months. So
Yep. And then yeah, the machine guns. I think that's their big loss. Losing
yeah,
those guys, I think that's gonna kind of hurt those shows a little bit.
yeah.
The other standout, perhaps for the worst, the bad reasons, Eric Darkstorm, who we mentioned, doing all of his interviews in hanging out the window of his car. Yeah, he stood out for the wrong reasons. Basically, the domestic violence towards the end of the season. He seems to actually hate women's wrestling, or he's just like jealous of them getting a spotlight, particularly Haley and her success.
So, like I said, I'm not up to those episodes yet, but I will say this is knowing that that does come up puts into light a lot of the stuff that I've seen with his attitude towards thing. They're almost sowing the seeds in the first few episodes where Haley's talking about the jealousy and envy and all that between the two of them, and between the spotlight that she's getting and stuff like that. So it's shocking. It's also surprising that he. Look, I don't know where I'd go with that conversation. To be honest, I'm trying to think of a safe way to bring up things. It's shocking.
Mhm. Yeah, I was surprised that they like showed the sort of the drug use, the domestic violence. I thought that maybe they would have tried to sweep that under the rug a little
I
bit.
have no doubt that OVW probably did try and get him to sweep it under the rug. But they would have also signed, all of those talents would have signed release agreements that said that anything they film is going to end up being on the show. Anything that happens is going to end up on the show. It's a risk that they took signing those agreements, and it's a risk they took doing those activities while those cameras were around.
Yeah, yeah, like if you don't want that to be shown to the world, maybe just don't do that while there's a Netflix camera.
Or just don't be a dick and don't do that in general in your life.
Yeah, yeah, like the domestic violence, just no. But
Yeah, no, stop.
the drugs, if you want to do drugs, just don't bring it into the workplace like a lot of these people seem to do, which
Well,
is
ours
bad.
quite clear in episode one is I don't care what you do at home when it comes to recreational use. Just don't do it before you're about to get into the ring, and don't do it here.
Mhm. Yeah, and Haley kind of listens a little bit, but there's an episode late in the season where she's still smoking, but because she can't smoke on the property, she drives like to the
Down
convenience
the road.
store, like two doors down, and then smokes and then comes back. I'm like,
Well, I think it
okay,
was episode two.
you're
I think
kind
it's
of doing
episode
what he
two when
said,
they're
but
on tour, when they're doing the tour of the fairs and stuff. Um, they don't really address it, but they show this footage of them talking in the car, and she's clearly smoking a joint in the car before she goes
yep,
walks into for a match.
yeah,
But they don't really address it and highlight it. But I did pick it up as a viewer. I was just like, she's smoking a joint. Like nobody lights a cigarette like that.
yes, yeah. It was
Yeah,
very like, what the hell is going on here?
yeah.
Not the best look for OVW overall, which is bad. And
And look, you said it earlier. It sucks seeing a wrestling organization that does have such a lineage and such an important role to play historically in this industry. Uh, Seeing where it is now and how it's been sort of a fall from grace. But also, it is what it is, right? It happens to the best businesses when they're not being run well.
yes, uh, yeah. And then like the last couple of notes I had were sort of touching on the independent wrestling thing. I do love that the OVW arena is simply just an industrial unit in a complex somewhere, and they constantly just like hype up that it's this big arena thing, and then they show the outside. Just oh, it's just an industrial unit. Like
Yeah,
nearly
looks
every
like an old
independent,
garage or an old storage unit or something.
yeah, like nearly every independent wrestling promotion here in Australia, like their training academy is generally just an industrial unit somewhere.
So there's a training, was it a tryout day for a local company here in Sydney next month, and I googled the address, and the address is a house.
Oh, good. Lovely.
right? But that's how the industry is, right?
Yep.
Especially the smaller local independents. It's that, and there's something cool about cool. Kitsch. I don't know. I'm trying to struggle to find the words, but yeah, there's something cool about local wrestling, doing it old school still.
Yeah, like I don't mind the industrial unit thing. Like I've been to the PWA Academy, and yeah, like it's a very nice setup. It's a nice new modern industrial unit.
Yep.
But yeah, it's an industrial unit. It's not an
It's,
arena.
it's,
Don't promote it as an arena.
it's the same as the New Japan dojo in Auckland. It's a nice unit. It's actually quite a modern one, but it's just an industrial unit. It's a garage.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they're not going to be like, oh, come to our stadium or arena show. Like, no, it's
Nah, nah.
our
I mean, they
academy.
call it the New Japan. What is it? It's the Fale Dojo, New Japan
Yep.
Pro Wrestling Fale Dojo. But they're not hiding what it is.
Yeah. And then I also like that OVW were running a couple of brewery shows. Again, very similar to what we're seeing recently in Australia with PWA, MCW, Riot City Wrestling, and even EPW over the last like 12 months have run sort of co-promoted events with like independent breweries. And it's like, I think that's a cool crossover that we're seeing with wrestling now
In
where
general.
they're getting into that sort of, let's promote us more as an entertainment thing that can come into your venue and help you as well as help us.
Yeah. It's something we've seen for a long time. I think with like expos and stuff like that. Like we see it with Comic Cons and stuff like that all the time. But seeing it happening at businesses, like there was actually, I can't remember who it was, that were doing one in Melbourne recently. I was considering flying down for the show because it looked like it was going to be a cool show.
Yeah. Yeah, like running at a brewery, perfect fit. Like people come in, they have a few beers, and then they watch some wrestling and love it. PWA have been like doing a lot of the music crossover stuff as well. Like they had
Yeah.
the emo night recently, which was actually super fun. It
Oh,
was
were you at that one? Were you?
yeah. So I was at that show, and it started
So,
off a little bit strange, where it was kind of a mixture of wrestling fans and the emo night people, and neither of them really knew like how to sort of react to each element of the show. But then once everyone kind of got into it and had a few drinks in them, and they're like, "Oh, this is actually really fun now."
yeah, that's super cool. The other cool thing that happens here in Australia, which is actually super unique in Australia, which is a similar concept, right? Is the workers' clubs and RSLs and stuff like that having wrestling on. Other countries around the world don't have networks of local bars like we do here.
Yeah, with like
Uh,
big halls in them
that
essentially.
have massive halls, yeah. Um, and it's super unique here that we have that where wrestling promotions can go from RSL to workers clubs and stuff like that and put on really good shows for decent sized audiences too. The local show that I go to for All Star Wrestling Australia, I go to their local one at the Padstow RSL every month, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And I genuinely think they're having to look for a new hall because they're filling that every month now.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to PWA regularly and Rock and Roll Wrestling, and they're the same. Like
Oh,
they're
I haven't
nice.
checked out rock and roll wrestling yet.
Yeah, PWA they give you the sort of 18 plus. This one's for the adults and the hardcore wrestling fans,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
And then you get Rock and Roll, which is like we're the kid friendly show. Like come down to Wollongong, go out for dinner, check out the beach, and then come to a wrestling show in the evening and have a great time.
Yeah, I'll have to check those guys out. I love silly wrestling.
Yeah, that's what it is. Like they have a character who is the tradie.
Yeah,
They have another guy who's the bachelor. Like
yeah,
it's fun, silly, gimmicky stuff, and it's really
yeah.
cool.
I mean, I love my good, serious wrestling as well. But I don't think that can exist without silly wrestling as well. Like using AEW as the example, right? You've got Moxley and the Blackpool Combat Club, which is super serious wrestling.
Mhm.
Like we are hardcore wrestlers, But on the same show, you can have Danhausen, who is cursing
running around
people.
cursing people. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, or the best friends like hugging, or
yeah.
Orange Cassidy wrestling with his
Who
hands in his
doesn't seem to care
pockets.
about anything,
Yeah,
but does.
yeah. But that's like the perfect mix of fun and serious, and
Yeah.
Rock and Roll do a lot of that. And their next show is October 28th, the Halloween theme show. So I'm expecting a lot of sort of
Oh, that'd be cool. See,
silly costume gimmick stuff.
that's what I enjoy about All Star Wrestling Australia as well. Is they're a really good mix of a lot of it is just silly wrestling, but they're holding it in workers' clubs where kids are coming in, so they need it to be a bit silly.
Yep. What else do we have? The huge sacrifice that some wrestlers make to be involved in wrestling, like sacrificing time with their family. Mahabali Shira chats about being suicidal when he was released from WWE, which was
Yep.
a very heavy moment. And then they even had one of the wrestlers, she sold her house to fund her wrestling passion. I'm like, okay, that's a crazy move.
Look, I know people have made sacrifices like that to fund their passions. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. But full credit to them for even going that far. Like you said, Shira is the prime example of that. He's left his family behind in India, and he's still sending money back to India to help look after his family back there. But he's having to his sacrifice he's making is leaving them at home, and to keep them funded, he's doing Uber Eats deliveries.
Yeah, he's not like making a living just purely on wrestling. He's
Yeah,
out there hustling, doing everything he can.
I think that's also the ego sacrifice as well, right? So in wrestling, it's an ego-driven industry, which I think it needs to be. But at the same time, being able to put aside your ego and go, I also need to feed my family, which means I'm going to, when I'm not in the ring, I'm delivering food.
Yeah, like if you can't make 100% of a living off wrestling, get out there and do other bits and pieces and do as much as you can so that you can continue to chase that passion. If you really love it, you'll be happily making those sacrifices.
Absolutely. It's the same with, look, getting into podcasting. I'm doing podcasting on the side as a fun thing that I'm passionate about. Uh, I'm not making a living off of that. I have to make my living off my day job.
Yep. And then the last note and thing that really stood out to me is towards the end of the season, OVW attempt to book, they actually do book James Storm for some matches against Shearer, and what was his name? Matt totally like blows up James Storm's business. Really, he calls out his $600 booking fee, and then says, "Oh, for $600, he's not even going to sell 60 tickets." I'm like, "What the hell? He's a big guy that you're bringing in, and you've just shit
Yeah.
all over him." Like,
We're sitting here in Australia and we know who this guy is.
yeah, he's probably not going to want to come back now after that,
No.
or he's going to
And
charge you double.
I would also argue $600 is a pretty good price for James Storm.
Yes. Yeah. Especially like Ohio.
Was that his total booking fee?
I think that was for like one show. But like,
Yeah.
still, like that's a pretty decent rate for someone that has been an Impact World Champion, Impact Tag, multiple time Impact Tag Team Champion. Like,
Had a cup of coffee in NXT.
yes, yeah, like he's got national TV exposure, global TV exposure.
Anyone who's an Impact or TNA fan considers the guy a legend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like Ohio feels like that would be prime territory for James Storm fans. Like, let's go and check out James Storm at OVW. Like, it's just down the road.
Yeah, I would think so. Like, just looking at the attendees and sort of the fact that they're on a Christian TV channel, and all that sort of thing. Like, I would assume that a lot of their viewers would be good old boys.
Yes,
they would get into the good old boy beer drinking cowboy gimmick.
Yeah, 100%. So it was weird that they broadcast that on Netflix and just blew up his whole whole business.
Yeah, that is a weird,
I
weird
imagine
choice
his
to make.
booking fee has changed a little bit now.
Yeah, potentially. And it's funny because he packs a shit about paying that price, but as someone who, like I said, I go to local shows here, and I've seen a show that has booked an international or big name talent like James Storm for their shows here. And I've watched their attendance go from 200 people attending to 600 people attending from month to
Mhm.
month because they've booked a big talent. When they booked Ultimo Dragon locally here, all of a sudden we went from 1 month sitting at tables, being able to eat and put our beer down while we were watching the show to nope, there's no tables this week because Ultimo Dragon's here and we've sold too many tickets.
Yeah, yeah, and even Rock and Roll Wrestling a few years back booked. They had a show with Tennille Dashwood
Yep.
and
Emma.
Ryback, and we went from an RSL club to the Snake Pit, a basketball stadium in Wollongong. It's like
Yep.
that's what booking someone like that can do for your shows. It'll bring in
Absolutely.
different new people who then will probably get hooked and come to the next show. Like it's an
Yeah.
investment. It's not just a one-off fee.
And also working with those talent make your wrestlers better.
Yes, 100%. So, bit weird that they put that in there, but it made for an interesting bit of footage.
Yeah.
In terms of, so you're only a few episodes in, what would you sort of rate Wrestlers on Netflix so far out of 5?
Okay. I do find that the show is a slow moving doco. And I think most wrestling fans these days, like if I'm going to assume that most viewers are going to be wrestling fans, and the fact that they don't have, apart from Al, they don't have a lot of big names on the show. I think it's probably going to be, let's say we're doing it out of 10.
I usually do out of 5.
Okay, out of 5, I'm going to rate it a 3 because I think it's interesting, super interesting. But the entertainment factor, I did find, I mean, I've had an entire week to watch the entire season. If it was a fast moving show, I would have actually probably stayed and watched everything back to back,
Mhm.
which I do for an interesting show. But I've found it hard to watch this show back to back. I'm
Yeah.
watching an episode, I'm going off, I'm coming back and watching another episode, I'm going away, I'm coming back and watching another episode. So, yeah, three out of 5. I think it's a solid show.
Yeah, that
It's
makes
just
sense
not
to me.
binge worthy.
Yep, that makes sense to me. I watched it with my mum, and like for her to get involved and interested in it, I think that spoke highly of it for me.
Yeah.
But
Is she a wrestling fan at all?
no, she
There you go.
no, she
Yeah.
she says she doesn't like MJF, but
Perfect.
she runs in and watches every single time.
Yeah, but that's exactly what you want, right? Is MJF isn't the guy that you want mum to love. Mum
Yes.
should hate MJF.
Yeah, she hates MJF, but she has to watch him every single time. So
Yeah.
which is perfect. So yeah, she watched it, and for me, like at 7 episodes, it's probably too long and too drawn out. I
Yep.
think maybe 4 or 5
Yep.
would have been like the sweet spot. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I would sit around a 3 as well. Like really solid show, super interesting if you're a wrestling fan or have sort of business knowledge and want to sort of get into small
Yeah.
business ownership and how to sort of look after people. This is a
Yep.
prime example of what not to do. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's Netflix's Wrestlers rated, reviewed, recapped, reacted to. Thank you everyone for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. Phid, do you want to go ahead and plug away all your stuff and all the social media handles?
Yeah, look, check out Down Under the Ring. We put 2 episodes out every single week, an AEW show and a WWE show. Highly recommend checking those out because we've got a lot of cool guests coming on now. So you can find us on all your podcast platforms. Just look up Down Under the Ring, as well as on our socials. It's DWN Under the Ring on Twitter or X, and then we're just Down Under the Ring on every other platform. And you can follow me at Phid McAwesome on everything as well. Luckily, I've got the same handle on everything, and anything for Original Geek. If you're following me, you'll see it.
Yep. Yeah, perfect. And you can follow me on social media at JamieApps Media and at Pario Magazine. Like you, it's the same thing across everything. It's very well done.
Yep. Brand consistency is important.
So thank you for coming on the show, and good luck with the podcast and Original Geek, and we'll hopefully collaborate more.
We have to have you. We have to have you on our podcast one day, and you can react to the week of wrestling with us.
Perfect. Happy to do it anytime.
Sounds good.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of JamieApps Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/JamieApps Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.